Welcome to the Internet Money Podcast. Today, I have my good friend Aakash. He is the founder of the Product Growth newsletter and podcast. So, Aakash, if you only had 1 minute to tell the audience how to launch and grow a successful product, what would you tell them?
Oh my gosh, as somebody who spent 15 years in product management, a minute is short. But the first thing I would do is figure out a problem that you personally have and that you are paying money for already, and that the solution you are paying for doesn't meet your needs. That is the best way to build a really good product, because you then have a product to compare against and say, I'm going to build something better than this. And so that's similar to how I built my content business. I didn't see any content out there that was tactical, that was about the how questions. Everything in the product management space are what and why questions, nothing about how. How do I build this product strategy? How do I write a PRD? How do I grow as a PM? So that's what my newsletter and podcast focus on. And because it's solving that problem that I particularly had, I'm able to go back and improve it. I'm able to resonate with the people who I'm getting feedback from. I'm able to understand people who cancel, why they cancel. So that's my number one North Star.
So, you talked about 15 years in this product industry. Talk to us a little bit about like some of the experiences you've had and some of the major takeaways you've had from each.
Sure. So I started back in 2008 at a company called Scout Force. They were a B2B SaaS for college recruiting athletic teams. One of the first SaaS really companies to target that space. So we massively like we had like 42% roughly of D1 college football teams. Think Alabama, University of Michigan, all of their recruiting staff using our SaaS. So we got massive reach pretty quickly. But as we realized, like, how do we churn? How do we prevent churn? How do we expand these accounts? Those were like the key topics that I worked on there. So I helped lead a lot of app redesigns and helped understand the basics of SaaS. Like, what is the basic economics once you've acquired the big logos? It's about growing with them. And so I learned how to grow with those big logos. And that was my formative experience. Then I started my own company called Raptor, which was a B2C, which was monetized by ads. So I got to learn the flip side. Instead of SaaS supported model, the ad supported model. And for that, we had to get to massive scale. So we had 350,000 monthly active users, on the order of 50 million player hours. We called them players, but they're really practicing raps, but it was basically a game. And we used a lot of gamification techniques in the product. And so that's how I learned like to build engagement loops, how to build loops so that people come back to your product daily, not just daily, multiple times a day, that they're using the product more in that day as well, because that was the key vector. More time in the app, more ads we could display. From there, I had a variety of experiences. I could go through the long list, but I'll just shortly cover like there was this public company called ThreadUp where I led growth. There was Epic Games, which is Fortnite, Affirm, which is a fintech company, and most recently Apollo, which is a SaaS company that a lot of people might have heard about, Apollo.io. So basically, it's one of those contact databases that is disrupting companies like ZoomInfo, and it has quickly grown to, I think the last time we announced its Series C, we said like over 50 million in ARR. So that SaaS company, I was a VP of product there, and we launched things like, we saw a lot of people using our contact database. How do we turn them into loyal habitual users? So very similar to what I had learned from my earliest experiences at Scout Force. And so we ship things like improving our Engage email product for sequences. And we ship things like creating a lightweight CRM that's totally free called Deals. So that was a really great experience to kind of round out my product management career.
Yeah, and for the people in the audience, Apollo is going to be the example that probably resonates with 99% of them. So let's talk a little bit, because we've had the founder of ListKit on there, good friends actually. So let's talk a little bit about like the expanding ListKit, because pretty much everyone in the audience will be familiar with cold email. So originally it was a contacts database, and then talk to us a little bit about like some of the ideas you guys had on how to expand it. So you talked about the lightweight CRM, you talked about kind of expanding the use cases. Walk us through some of the decisions you guys made there.
So if you look at the sales tech space generally, there's like a limited set of products, right? So everything is built atop a CRM. From there, you have contacts that you reach out to. You email them with a sequences tool. You record those calls with some sort of call recording tool. You potentially optimize your email lists by having like a data cleansing tool. Like there's, a very limited set of products out there ultimately that a sales team really needs to function at its best. So what all companies do in the space is they start with one use case. For Apollo, contact database, and then they expand into the other use cases. And so it's a very predictable, normal playbook. for us, I think some of the insights were in how we thought about sequencing it. So if you think about sequencing for additional products, the first thing you want to do is like, who are your existing users within that sales team? So if you think about the people who are looking for contacts, they're also the people doing the initial outreach, for instance, your SDR. So for those folks, what you want to do is you want to enable them to create really good automated sequences that are not spray and pray, but actually like truly personalized, truly delivered, truly open, truly clicked on, right? So building out the entire suite of functionality. There are entire products like SalesLoft and Outreach focused on it. So our goal was get to something that's like 80% of the job done, launch that, and then over time build a product that's even better than the specialized players. And so by the time I got there, we already had a product that was pretty competitive with those SalesLoft and Outreaches, but there were new competitors coming out like Instantly and Smart Leads. And so we needed to quickly adapt to what they were doing, even Lemlist, and learn from them and bring those best practices into our product for Engage. After we got that Engage use case nailed, then we started to think about, okay, what are the adjacent users within sales, right? So that's where the deals, the lightweight CRM, or if you think about like your calendar scheduling, there's Chili Piper and Calendly, really big tools within sales. So then we built a tool that is like a free meetings tool that monetizes with a meeting router. So we kind of built up and across the stack as it related to our products in order to help sales teams succeed. And you'll see this across any SaaS. So if you look at product management SaaS, there's all these different SaaS use cases like session replays, user research, product analytics. All those companies are converging as well. And so the litmus test to really think about is like departmental budgets as it relates to a department budget, whether it's data or any other budget, product management or sales. There's always going to be this convergence where everybody else chooses all the other use cases for those SaaS.
Yeah, and as a product expert, do you have any opinion on, like, we can look at something like Go High Level, like GHL, and they're trying to pretty much replicate every software for the marketing and sales stack. And then you look at something like Close.com, or I believe it was originally Close or Close.io, and they are specific. Like, they're like, hey, we just want to be the best sales CRM. Do you have any like particular opinion on like really trying to nail like one ICP, one use case, and just going deep, 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 more features on that, or expanding out?
So the data is pretty clear, right? All these companies, they tend to acquire customers based on like one use case. So you have to nail one use case. You have to basically consider yourself best in class for a use case or best in class at that price point for a particular use case. So I think that is incredibly important for any company out there. You want to choose a really small, narrow problem that somebody has, and you want to become known as the industry leader. And the use case is the layer to potentially think about being blue ocean. Instead of being red ocean and attacking a problem that everybody else is already attacking, why not attack a unique angle of it to create a blue ocean for yourself? So for instance, we look at Lemlist. They really took this angle of deliverability, right? And so that was very important for them. For Apollo, we really took this angle of like being like the Cadillac tool for Engage, where like you can send out thousands of emails really quickly, but then we'll help you do it in a way that you actually get deliverability. So a slightly different angle on a similar problem. And so what I would recommend is you really get that entry point. And then as the data shows, right, most of these companies, they're driving most 80% of their usage and 80% of their revenue off that cash cow type of product. It's very rare that you're going to see a company that truly successfully is expanding into other product and market areas. Usually they do that via acquisition. So you look at a Salesforce, they've acquired different marketing clouds, they've acquired different analytics clouds. That's how they now have 26 billion in ARR. You look at a HubSpot. So yes, they do have marketing and sales kind of cornered now, but they've done that over time. They're one of the few companies that has actually built out that portfolio without super heavy acquisitions. So if you want to do that, then you need to be the best at your price point again. So for HubSpot, they were best at their price point of free CRM. And so they got a bunch of users in. So I think that that's how you should think about your strategy, is either best or best in your price point.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting framework. And then one very interesting thing I found from your background is talking about the gamification aspect. Because when we think of B2B software, I don't really think too much about gamification. The one that comes to mind maybe is school. They have like the different ranks in their info product tech. I don't know if you're familiar with school. I assume you are, but if not, I can.
I'm not hugely familiar, besides the fact that Alex Hormozy did some sort of a marketing deal with them.
Yeah, so essentially they have this one gamification feature where the more you interact on the platform, the more you can uprank. And then what info product creators can do is they can unlock certain segments of their course based on your rank. So like very simple kind of like Duolingo gamification, like trying to step people along. Because a big problem in the info space is like you'll sell somebody a course, they'll watch like 10% of it,
Yeah.
and people will let go. So talk us some of the things you learned about gamification and maybe some of the applications you've seen this in the B2B space and how we can like integrate it.
Yeah, so I think about gamification in two major ways. The first is getting people to complete setup to aha of your product, and the second is driving an engagement loop to bring them back. So, in terms of setup to aha for your product, look at your stats, guys. Create an aha metric for your product. Like 80, 90% of your new users aren't getting to aha. This is the biggest problem in your business for most people if retention is a problem, which for most people, retention is a problem. So you need to address this activation to aha. So if you go look at Apollo's onboarding, for instance, you can see how I've created a gamified onboarding for Apollo. You have this ability to unlock free credits. I mean, those are worth money, right? Like you would pay money for these contacts, which are what the credits are in Apollo's database. They're basically people's emails and phone numbers. And so if you want access to emails and phone numbers, complete the things within the onboarding. And if you want to learn even more about the product, so we just talked about the product portfolio. So you can get, let's say, they keep playing around with the numbers, but something like 400 to 500 contacts for free, just doing the basic product. But for each additional product, you can get 400 to 500 more credits. And why are they willing to basically pay you for doing stuff in the product? Because it's getting you to that aha moment where you understand what this product actually does. And so that's been a massive lever to increase the aha rates. So that's number one. Number two is, as a B2B SaaS, the other big thing you're dealing with is you want to expand the product, right? You want to expand it into more users so you get more seats so that you get more subscription revenue. Plus, the more deeply you penetrate into an organization, the higher their retention rate. So both from a gross and net revenue retention rate perspective, you really want to drive this ongoing engagement of multiplayer mode. And so if you think about games, like how do they get people to stay on a Fortnite to play for 10, 20, 30,000 hours? Fortnite has now been going on for 10 plus years and people have been playing it for 10 plus years. How is that? It's obviously the multiplayer interactions, right? So the same thing you can see in B2B products like Figma. How nice is it to see somebody's cursor moving around? You can see the same thing in Miro, right? Real-time whiteboard. So they're creating this multiplayer collaboration. It's basically like a video game. In fact, if you go talk to their engineers, they have performance engineers, just like a video game company does. They're looking at what is the latency of the cursor? Is it real time enough? Is it updating the frames at a high enough rate on a crappy old MacBook from 15 years ago, right? So they're thinking about all these gamified problems around performance, multiplayer collaboration. And then finally, if you think about games, what do games do better than most B2B software? They make dying fun. In Fortnite, you're just constantly getting killed, right? Oh my God, we're getting killed. How do we make getting killed so much more fun, right? Maybe you can spectate the best player in the lobby so you can learn a thing or two. Maybe you can chat with your other friends who are killed. Maybe you can have a really cool animation when you're dead. Maybe you can make it one click to load into the next game without doing anything, right? So these are all ways they made dying easier. What is lack of success in B2B SaaS? So if we think about Apollo, for example, lack of success might be that you send somebody an email and it bounced, or they marked it spam, right? So how can we make that fun? How can we, instead of somebody being like, oh no, my deliverability is going down, I'm never going to reach anybody, we can instead alert them in a fun way, like, hey, you have 5 new tasks to do to address your deliverability problem. And if you don't, it's going to become a bigger problem down the line. So let's be fun. Let's make it one click for you to fix these 5 things, right? So that's how you bring it into the product, the same things you were seeing in games, and you drive those key metrics.
Yeah, I'm very interested by the gamification from the outset because our friends from Liskia, what they do instead is they largely have an onboarding call with somebody. I assume I haven't talked to Christian specifically about this, that this is like maybe a secret upsell for their done for you offer, but they have someone come and build your first query with you so that you can scrape like a good list, all that kind of stuff. Had you guys looked at doing something like that, like having a one-on-one onboarding call, or is it just a lot more seamless to do like the gamified version?
Well, it just depends what your goals are, who your target market is, who you're selling into. If you're selling into enterprise, the contract value is high enough that you can afford an onboarding call and you probably need it because they expect it. If you are selling into small and medium sized businesses, who knows? Maybe they may not even want an onboarding call. If you look at a company like Apollo, a lot of our revenue is coming from people globally, all over the world in different time zones that might not be available when we are. B, people who are often doing it out of their own pocket, crazily enough. They're salespeople who want to hit their quota. And so they're paying out of their own pocket. So when are they using it? See, like at 2 a.m. in the night sometimes. So we're not going to be available for that onboarding call for them in there. So you need to have a really good self-service given those three factors for Apollo. If your factors are different, your situation might be different. If you always sell into the US enterprise customers in SF and Seattle, which a lot of B2B SaaS companies do, then you should have a person who literally goes out to the site and like goes and talks to them and like have like 5 onboarding checkpoints to make sure that every single member, every single seat that they've paid for is active and used, right? So that would be what you should do with a bigger contract because you can A, afford it, and B, they're requiring it. So onboarding calls, if you think about who's been most aggressive about it, like Superhuman, they'll have an onboarding call with like each new user on a corporate account. That's like actually crazy because it's only $15 a month. So you can go to the aggressive direction. It kind of depends on your strategy. So Superhuman's doing that as a part of their strategy because they know after that onboarding call, the retention rate is so much higher that it justifies the cost for us. So if you can kind of come up with that equation, maybe the onboarding call makes sense for you, but I would recommend you really price out that call. Like who's doing the call? How much are you paying that call? How many calls are they doing per day? What is their utilization? How much time off are you paying for them? Then you can get a fully loaded cost of the call. What might look like 30 minutes is probably more like 2 hours. And what looked like X salary is probably X salary times 0.3 when you think about it fully loaded. So when you do that, then you can see, okay, this is the cost of the onboarding call. Is there an ROI?
Yeah, absolutely. All good things to spec out. Now, most of our audience will come from like the agency, the coaches space. And, I think as building a SaaS or like a B2B SaaS is always a dream for most people. And talk to us a little bit about like, when should they consider bringing on like a product person to help them out? Because a lot of these guys they have experience, but not necessarily in the building SaaS realm.
Yeah, I don't think you should build a product. You should hire a product manager for sure until you have n plus one engineering teams, where n is the number of co-founders. So if you have 3 co-founders, your co-founders should be your product managers up until you have 4 engineering teams. Typically, an engineering team meaning like more than 7 engineers. So until you have 28 engineers, you're hiring that 29th engineer, then you can go ahead and hire a product manager if you have 3 co-founders. But yeah, sorry guys, if you don't know about products, you have to learn about it. It's actually not that hard. You use products all day, every day. You need to train your eye to notice what's going on. So you're listening to this on a podcast player or watching it over YouTube, right? What are you noticing about the layout? What has changed in the product? Why have they made those changes? What are the metrics they use to drive those changes? Start noticing your software. That's number 1. Number 2, just get out there and go do it, right? Build a product. Stop holding yourself back with like, I don't have the products experience. I'm a sales guy, whatever. Cursor AI exists. Go pay your $20 a month. You literally just type in / a note for what the function should be, and it'll create the code for you, right? And then you can use something like Claude Sonnet to debug. So there's really nothing holding you back from creating a B2B SaaS in 2024. It's literally as easy as prompting AI. You don't need to be an expert. You can learn over time. So start noticing your products and then get out there and build a product, and you'll learn so much by doing. You'll learn everything you need to know.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned Claude and Sonnet that we've all been, or sorry, Claude Sonnet. Very interesting that you mentioned Cursor because I feel like I used to be an engineer at Google, and it does seem like code itself is now being largely commoditized. What do you think the skills of the future are if like most people can now build some kind of production app? Do you feel like it is this organization skill, this product development skill?
Well, most people can't build a Google scale production app without putting in, at least the 2,000 hours into their app, even though they have Cursor and Claude Sonnet by their side. As the technicalities of building that, you need to start to build out your different microservices. You need to make them all scalable. You need to start to think about your cloud providers and how big their bills are getting and start to optimize those bills. So there's a whole ton under the surface. There's an entire iceberg out there, right? You can create a front-end web app that's sitting on top of an OpenAI API wrapper that's web only, that only handles 100 users with AI in 2 hours. But if you want to create something that has a mobile app, is secure, takes payments, has a marketing site, has good login systems, has good indexing on SEO, has the ability to handle even 10,000 simultaneous users. Each time you go up in those layers that I mentioned of details, you're going to hit walls, right? Where the app is going to break apart, and you can prompt Cursor to learn it, but it's going to take you that time. And to get to your level, Google software engineering, you probably put in like a whole bunch of years. You're still going to have to put in those years to learn, because high level system design, debugging, uh, being able to figure out what to actually build, all those skills, the AI still can't do for you.
Yeah, I agree very much with the debugging things. I used to work on Firebase, so we were always trying to make it super easy for people to build apps. And actually, they had acquired Firebase in order to make it like an upsell, where it's like, hey, when you outgrow Firebase, then you could be elevated to working on GCP. Maybe now you need Bigtable or some other kind of thing. But now that I see more of these, like, Lambda functions, all of these kinds of things, building apps has become significantly easier since I started doing it. And I'm very curious to see like what the future holds. And I suspect that these like product management tasks, actually like being able to spec out a good app, are the skills of the future. I don't know if you have a general take on that.
Well, unfortunately, only people like you are best positioned to have the patience to do all the stuff that's required out of a cursor. B, to be able to debug when the AI hits a ball, like a breaking point. Like, there's a reason all these people didn't become software engineers, right? They didn't like staring in front of a computer, in front of a debugger for 8 hours a day. And as you also need really good flow to do engineering, where you start to learn all the elements of the code over like a 4 hour session. And if you go get called out to a meeting, you just get sucked out and you're zapped and you're done. Like, you can't go right back in and create that mental model of where all the code and how it was working together. And so you need to have those long uninterrupted deep work blocks. So fundamentally, software engineers are still the best people equipped to use software engineering AI tools. And they will be the people doing it in the future, because they're the ones who have self-selected into staring at lines of code, and you're still going to be doing that. So if anything, those software engineers are going to become much more efficient,
Yeah,
because the boilerplate code, the copy paste code, the searching Stack Overflow, that part is basically gone, because you just slash and the AI suddenly does it from a note to code, right? So you have that component there, but you still don't have the actual building and the perseverance and the interacting with product managers, who are so annoying to interact with, because they have 9 to 5 booked meetings. So you have to ping them on Slack 3 times to get more detail on their PRD, right? So that all is still going to exist. So I think it's highly overrated, the demise of software engineers, highly overrated the demise of product managers. In product management specifically, what we've seen is that AI has been a boon to product management. So with Mark Zuckerberg, Year of Efficiency, Brian Chesky, I'm eliminating traditional product management. What actually happened was product management had a decline in 2021 and 2022. Luckily, it's finally taking off again in 23 and 24, thanks to the success of these AI companies who need product managers. So in the PM case, AI has actually been a boon to PM. And in the software engineering case, I think the death of it is greatly over exaggerated.
and for people, and I should have probably defined this earlier, but let's talk a little bit for people that are in the agency space, the coaches, consultants. What is like a product manager in your eyes? Because we mentioned PRD, so product design documents. Talk to us a little bit about like the overall role that a product manager has.
Yeah. So as I said, like post 28 engineers, if you're thinking about this, right? So basically you're like Series A plus companies, or if they're bootstrapped, if they have more than 30 engineers, they start to hire product managers. So if you think about what a product manager is hired for initially and what they do at a medium and a big company, it's totally different. So initially, a product manager is often kind of like the right hand man of the founder. because they have been the product manager up until now. They might have all these big features they want to build. They know exactly what those features are. At the initial stages, the product manager is going to come in and they're going to help the designers and engineers deliver on that vision that the founder has. Now, as you go into a mid-stage and large stage company, product managers start to actually take over elements of the strategy. The founder isn't as ensconced in the details of little areas of the product, like the sign in, sign up flow. But there's a lot of ROI in improving the sign in, sign up flow. So you staff an engineering team, a designer, and a product manager. That's kind of like the unit of a product team. You might even staff, if it's a really important product team, a product analytics person and a user researcher. So you might have this constellation of groups, and these are your R&D groups that are focused in on an area of a product. And what the product manager does, they don't manage those people, by the way. What they do is they organize those people. They lead without authority, but with influence. So they lead with influence by helping create these specific key documents: the product strategy, the product requirements documents, and then the feature results write-ups. So basically, what should we build? Here's the specifics of what we built. Here's how it performed. They create these work products just like engineers create code, designers create designs, in order for the team to apply kind of that scientific method, to have some directional chaos instead of just addressing all the bugs that are coming in all the time, to actually take innovative bets instead of just having the original product that they've had, actually try to evolve it for the next stage. So that's kind of the key role of a product manager. And then as you get into the big companies, product managers start to play a huge political and cross collaborative role. So as a big company, you have your marketing department, sales department, customer success department. When you update your product, they all want to know. They want to know well in advance. They want to be trained up on it. They want to be trained up on how to sell it, trained up on how to debug support questions. So designers and engineers, A, don't have the time, B, don't want to be doing that work. So that's where the product manager comes in.
Yeah, I think I forget the exact term we used to use at Google, but it used to be essentially like product managers would be CEOs at other companies. It's like you're essentially the CEO of the product. You completely own the direction. And yeah, as a previous engineer, I didn't want to deal with any of that kind of stuff. It was there were in a bunch of meetings with legal, marketing, all kinds of people. And I was like, oh, I was just so happy somebody else was dealing with that. Now, you're big into the content space and talking about tactical advice for product people. Talk to us a little bit about like some of your content journey, like what got you into creating content, and then talk to us a little specifically about the goal of your like podcast/newsletter.
Sure. So, like everybody else, I got into content during COVID. I used to be a workaholic for my entire career. So, I used to work at this company, Epic Games, here in North Carolina. As you might guess, at a game like Fortnite, the culture was to be there like 12 hours a day. I used to get in at like 7, leave at 7, right? All of a sudden, I'm at home. Like in reality, we all know what goes on in the office. Like I could get my work done basically in 9 to 5, but I had this entire 7 to 9, 5 to 7, which was basically like work networking that I was doing that just didn't exist in COVID. And the Slack channels were dead. Nobody actually wanted to like post in like gaming industry news. So this was a channel that I used to use actually basically to get inroads. As a product manager at Fortnite, it's like a 5,000 person game. Even though I have some influence, I need to like start to know better some game engineers, start to know better some people on the publishing team that are working on some initiative I haven't even heard of, right? So I used to comment in this gaming industry news channel. So I had this writing habit built up at Epic Games. And all of a sudden it went dry in COVID. So I posted an article on LinkedIn, Roblox as the Shopify of gaming. It would have been the same thing I would have posted for work. Wasn't getting any engagement at work. It was helping me at work, so I just posted on LinkedIn. Boom, engagement, dopamine rush. As anybody knows, posting on LinkedIn in 2021, like you could post an article and you'd get a lot of engagement. So many people were spending time on LinkedIn, and there were almost no content creators on LinkedIn that were producing anything worth reading. So all of a sudden you just produce anything worth reading and a lot of attention comes your way. And so I kind of benefited from LinkedIn being a very underrated platform at the time. The people who were creating really good content in that era were like very focused on Twitter. So I got lucky, like bringing a lot of the Twitter tactics to LinkedIn. I started to experiment with different topics. Started to use hooks like they use. So before all the LinkedIn gurus and Jasmine Ellisish, and before any of those people existed, like Twitter people were using hooks. So I brought hooks over to LinkedIn and boom, like my followership started to take off. So as I was doing that, I like this. I took Rite of Passage by David Perel, where he's a huge advocate that you have to build a newsletter. So I launched my newsletter. Off the back of my LinkedIn, I would just comment like, oh, subscribe to my newsletter. And that process of posting so much on LinkedIn and posting on my newsletter helped me find my niche. So I always say the market found me, not the other way around. I didn't start to say like, I'm just going to write about product management, how to topics. Like, as I wrote about those, the market engaged. And then I launched a paid newsletter and the market monetized on those. And so then I would write about different topics occasionally. Like, I'd just go outside my niche just to test. And always like these core how to guides monetize the best. And a lot of job searching guides monetize the best. So then I doubled down on that in terms of the metric mattering for me. And then most recently, I realized like for each newsletter piece, I would go talk to like 15, 20 people. That was like my angle. Like it's something that you haven't seen before. I'm doing an original research. And somebody was like, dude, you're like talking to so many people. Like you're so good at interviewing. Like record some of these, monetize this, create a podcast. And I had always been like, oh, well, there are a lot of product podcasts out there. But I just realized like there's kind of unlimited demand for good content. And the keyword there is good, right? Because so much content isn't that good. And so I try to create something kind of original, good in my space, kind of bringing like what modern wisdom and what Joe Rogan are doing with like 2.5 to 3 hour deep dives, going super, super deep, kind of like the Lex Friedman model into product podcasts. And so that's what I'm up to. And yeah, that was my journey.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Obviously, I'm a huge podcast stan, but podcasts I think are really underrated. Even though people are like, "Oh, everyone has a podcast." Like one, most people don't. Two, like almost nobody continues doing it. And three, it's like the best relationship arbitrage that exists probably in the world. Because I could message a lot of founders right now, get them on a podcast for an hour. But if I was like, "Hey, could I like pick your brain and grab you like a coffee?" They'd be like, "No." But for a podcast, they will. It's kind of ridiculous. So it's great relationship arbitrage. So, okay. So now you're doing the deep dives with the podcast. Then the podcast is essentially now informing the newsletter because that's your research piece for the newsletter itself. So let's say we used to do this exercise at BlackRock. Let's talk through the life of a transaction of maybe one of your paid newsletters. So you're gonna interview these 15 guys. That's all going to be content. You're going to post it on YouTube, and then that content informs the newsletter. Just talk us through how that functionally works.
Basically, and all those 15 interviews are unlisted. So the only way to access those is to become a paid newsletter subscriber, and then you'll see those videos in the paid newsletter. And then for public consumption, we have the podcast so that you get a sense of how good of an interviewer I am. And also because I wanted to diversify my revenue streams. So I was so reliant on paid subscriptions. And interestingly enough, unlike some product content, kind of like Apollo, I don't know why, maybe because I learned so much from Apollo, but people were paying out of pocket. People still pay out of pocket for my newsletter. The majority of people do, even though they often have a learning and development budget. Like Google will, if you submit an expense receipt for my thing, they will just reimburse you. They're like $150 for you to upskill. Sure. Yeah, we'll pay for that. But still, somehow people pay out of pocket, which means churn is brutal. It's like typical B2C model. Like if somebody's paying $15 a month every single month, they're comparing you to Netflix because you cost about as much as Netflix. And they're saying, is Netflix or this delivering me more value? So I wanted to diversify my revenue streams because I still have a really fast growing free newsletter. So that's growing like, more than 5,000 free newsletter subscribers per month. So I wanted to monetize that component as well. So the podcast allows me to monetize via ads, which goes back to the other business model I'd learned in my days from my story. So I basically use the two business models I learned in my career in my business today.
Yeah, off rip, I have a few ideas immediately for your business. One is to sell actually B2B and be like, and essentially to sell to like a Google and be like, hey, all of your product managers are paying for this individually. Why don't you guys just sponsor this? I'll give you a discounted rate for the business and then sell directly to the business. The other is to launch a coaching program where it's like, hey, you guys are obviously interested in leveling up your career. How about I work one-on-one with you for the next 3 months and try to really upskill you and get you to the point that I'm at?
Yeah. Both of those are really good ideas. The B2B one is interesting. Like I'd have to like build the product to be B2B ready. So for instance, I have a lot of job searching content. I'd probably want to just like remove the job searching content because they don't want them to job search out of the current job that they're in. And then another thing I'd probably need to do is like figure out like all the login authentication and stuff like that. I'm built on top of Substack. Substack has none of that functionality. So I'd have to switch to something like a Ghost in order to create all of that functionality. So that could be really good. And it goes back to like, who's your ICP, who's your target audience? And then also, what are you passionate about? So going to the coaching thing, like the one-on-one, first of all, I have to charge a lot, right? I have to charge my hourly rate in terms of how much revenue I'm making. And actually, like the prices you'll see online are quite a bit below my hourly rate. I just keep it that way because it's already too damn high for most people, right? It's like only very few like VPs and directors in SF in Seattle have the type of disposable income to afford my coaching. You know, I'm not passionate about it at all, actually. Like I'm passionate about like advice at scale, creating content, and coaching is not like my passion. And so like you'd get like these expensive, you know, coaching call, and then they'll be like, wait, so you're not going to send me anything afterwards? And like, you've only prepared for like 10 minutes before. And it's like, yeah. And even that 10 minutes was free for you only. Like you didn't even pay me for that. So for me, the economics of coaching, they don't scale like a newsletter
Yeah.
and a podcast scale. And so I've already like kind of priced myself out of coaching.
Fair enough. Well, you found yourself on an info products podcast, so we'll have to show you a few more ideas on that. Is one is you could do a group coaching program, so it would be like a 6K entry, and then you would essentially be coaching like, let's say like 1 to 10 or 1 to 30, and then all of those people that should easily hit your hourly rate. But I will stop shilling
I love
coaching
that
programs.
idea. We should keep talking about it. We can keep talking about it if you want.
No, it's very interesting. So let's talk about the content creation, because this is obviously like a big point for us. So you've now got the podcast, you've got the newsletter, and then you've got your. Are you still working for Apollo? Or what's your current gig?
I left Apollo at the beginning of the year. So I did like a little over a year there. It was super fun. I wish I had done longer or could do longer, but it was impossible. Like this business is already going to be like much bigger than I could ever be in product management. So why was I killing myself? Like what I was doing, like as you guys might know, like as a VP, like basically you work from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Even though I have 2 kids, like just always on call, always meetings, all the time, always traveling. And then I would do my content business from like 10 p.m. to like 3 a.m. And then my kids would wake me up at like 6 or 7. So I was like literally sleeping like 4
Wow.
hours. So I didn't need to kill myself. I was making more than enough to just focus on the content.
And then what's your goal? Is there like a certain amount of subscribers you're trying to hit? Is it like a certain amount of revenue?
For me personally, like I want to reach like at least 10% of PMs out there. So there's like at least like 20 million PMs out there. I'm not even close. I have 135,000 email subscribers. So like 2 million is something that I have in mind, which is basically like a 20xing of where I am today. So I feel like the world is my oyster. Like what I want to do is provide them with like the most in-depth researched content that is like their career sidekick for their entire career. And so that's like my North Star in terms of like the outcome I'm producing for users. And then like the outcome for me, like I operate my business like it's a lifestyle for-profit business. Like I don't hire like a VC, like I don't reinvest all my profits. Like I'm keeping those profits. Like I'm moving into a nicer house. I'm driving a nicer car. I'm taking nicer vacations. And like I'm going to be moving to LA. Like in LA, that scale goes forever. There are $50 million houses out there. So yeah, just that's how I'm thinking about it.
Hey, well, you're on the right podcast for that. We're all about the lifestyle here. So talk to us a little bit about like, there are a lot of agency owners and coaches and consultants. Well, mostly the coaches already have personal brands, but there are a lot of people that are good at what they do. And they're like, you know what? I didn't document any of the journey. I didn't really create any kind of content. And now they're trying to get into the content game. What would you say would be like your 80-20 advice to somebody trying to get into content, a business owner, somebody of that nature?
The first thing you want to do is you want to figure out what platform fit do you have. For most of you, if you're going after like a B2B audience, we're talking LinkedIn these days in terms of organic reach. But maybe you're talking about Twitter if you have the right sort of founder ICP, because all the founders are on Twitter. Or maybe we're talking about, I don't know, whatever other social network might be out there. You know, if you're doing a health and wellness product, Instagram is going to be great for you. If you're doing some sort of kids entertainment product, TikTok is going to be great for you, right? So figure out one network, just one. And then start actually consuming stuff, guys. Like some of you guys are like, I want to be on LinkedIn, but I freaking hate LinkedIn and it's cringe. It's like, no, like figure out who are the creators on LinkedIn whose content you are looking forward to. Find those people, follow those people, start to read their comments on their content, learn what makes their content so good, and then reverse engineer that for your own content. And don't start paying for expensive advice or expensive tools. Like it's like the Mr. Beast advice. Make 100 videos and then come to me. And with every single video, make sure you improved on the last one. Same thing. Make 100 LinkedIn posts or make 100 Twitter posts and make sure each one does a little bit better than the last. Make sure you're looking at the metrics. Make sure you're looking at the engagement. And by that process, you will have conquered that network as long as you A, like it, and then B, give those 100 tries.
I love it. Now, finally, where can people connect with you online?
Yes, so please find me. My newsletter and podcast are at www.news.akashg.com. Product growth, you can just Google it too. And yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jax.
Awesome. My pleasure. Well, everyone, get back to growing your agency.